Think about the last meal you warmed up. Perhaps it was dinner from the night before. Maybe it was a quick bite this morning before starting your day. You opened the fridge, placed the container in the microwave, set it for 2 minutes, and carried on. Nothing about it seemed risky. And that's the issue. I'm Dr. John Anderson. I've studied thousands of patient histories. One of the most consistent patterns I've observed in people who develop serious illnesses, despite doing everything right, isn't their genetics, their weight, or even their stress levels. It's their kitchen habits, particularly how they handle food the second time around. Today, I'll walk you through 5 specific foods that undergo a dangerous chemical transformation when reheated. Not dangerous in a vague, general sense, but dangerous in a precise, documented biochemical way, one that becomes significantly more serious after the age of 60. Here's what most people don't realize. The danger isn't just about food poisoning. It's about what these reheated foods do to your cells over time, how they quietly fuel inflammation, how they accelerate damage to your arteries and DNA, how they create the exact conditions that cardiologists and oncologists see building for years before a diagnosis is ever made. We're not talking about one bad meal. We're talking about a pattern, a daily, invisible pattern that could be working against you right now. Stay with me through all 5 foods because the last one on this list is something most people eat multiple times a week. The science behind what happens when you reheat it might genuinely change how you think about it forever. Before we dive into the foods, I need to share a short but essential piece of biology. Without this foundation, the rest won't resonate as it should. Your body deals with damage every single day. Damaged cells, reactive molecules called free radicals, low-grade infections, minor toxins. At 35, your body handles this almost invisibly. Repair systems are fast, immune responses are sharp, and the liver processes toxins efficiently. After 60, that changes, not because you're falling apart, but because the margin for error narrows. Your liver metabolizes compounds more slowly. Your gut lining, which acts as a barrier between food and your bloodstream, becomes thinner and more permeable. Your DNA repair mechanisms, the cellular editors that catch mutations before they become problems, work more sluggishly. The result: low-level toxins that your body handled easily at 45 now linger longer. Inflammatory signals that once faded in a day now simmer for 3. Mutations that would have been caught and corrected sometimes slip through. This is the environment where chronic inflammation thrives. Chronic inflammation isn't the kind you feel when you sprain an ankle. That's acute. It comes, does its job, and leaves. Chronic inflammation is different. It's quiet. It's persistent. It runs in the background like a program you never opened but can't close. And it's the common denominator behind the 2 health threats that concern me most in patients over 60: cardiovascular disease and abnormal cellular growth, what we commonly call cancer. Every food on today's list, when reheated, adds fuel to that fire. Some produce chemical compounds that attack arterial walls. Others generate substances classified by international health agencies as probable human carcinogens. Some disrupt gut health in ways that send inflammatory signals directly into your bloodstream. These aren't theories. The chemistry is documented. Before we get into the first food, take a moment to say hello in the comments. Tell me your name and where you're watching from. I read every comment and would love to know who I'm helping today. Food. Number 1, eggs. Let's start with something almost universally considered a health food, especially for seniors: eggs. High in protein, easy to digest, and packed with nutrients. Here's what nobody tells you at your annual checkup. Eggs contain cholesterol. You already know that. What most people don't know is that there's a profound difference between cholesterol in its natural state and cholesterol that has been oxidized, chemically altered by heat, light, and especially reheating. When you cook an egg and let it cool, the cholesterol inside begins a slow oxidation process. When you reheat that egg, particularly in a microwave, which heats unevenly and creates hot spots, that oxidation accelerates dramatically. The result is a group of compounds called oxysterols. Here's why oxysterols matter to you. Research published in leading cardiovascular journals has linked oxysterols directly to endothelial dysfunction, damage to the inner lining of your blood vessels. Oxysterols are absorbed into your arterial walls, where they don't just cause inflammation, they actively promote the formation of foam cells, one of the earliest building blocks of arterial plaque. For someone over 60 whose arteries are already less elastic than they were at 40, adding a daily serving of oxidized cholesterol is like adding sandpaper to a surface that's already worn thin. But there's a second layer to the egg story that concerns me even more. A reheated egg, particularly the protein-rich whites, undergoes a process called protein denaturation combined with Maillard reaction byproducts. In plain terms, the proteins break down and reform in ways that produce compounds your gut struggles to process. This creates localized gut inflammation. And as I mentioned earlier, gut inflammation after 60 doesn't just stay in your gut, it travels. The simple fix, cook your eggs fresh, they take 3 minutes. This is one situation where meal prepping genuinely works against you. If you must reheat, do it on the stovetop at very low heat. Never in a microwave and never more than once. But truly, just cook them fresh. Food number 2, seafood and fish. This one surprises people every time. Fish, especially fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel, is one of the most recommended foods for heart health after 60. The omega-3 fatty acids in these fish are legitimately powerful anti-inflammatory agents. So why is reheating them a problem? Because omega-3 fatty acids are polyunsaturated fats, meaning they have multiple points along their molecular chain where they're chemically vulnerable. Heat causes these fats to oxidize. The first time you cook fish, some oxidation occurs that's manageable. When you reheat that fish the next day, you're applying heat to fats that are already partially oxidized and far more chemically unstable. The result is a cascade of oxidized lipid compounds, including something called malondialdehyde, or MDA. MDA is a byproduct of lipid peroxidation, the breakdown of these sensitive fats under heat. It has been studied extensively and classified as a mutagenic compound, meaning it can directly damage DNA. It's also a potent pro-inflammatory agent that targets arterial tissue. Here's the bitter irony. You eat fish to protect your heart, but reheated fish may be doing the opposite, delivering oxidized fats that stress the very arteries you're trying to protect. But the story doesn't end with chemistry. There's also a bacterial concern with reheated seafood that's uniquely serious for adults over 60. Fish and shellfish harbor specific bacteria, Vibrio Listeria monocytogenes, that thrive in cold storage and survive reheating if internal temperatures aren't perfectly uniform. Listeria is particularly dangerous for older adults because immune function naturally decreases with age. What might be a mild illness in a 35-year-old can become a serious systemic infection in a 70-year-old. The solution is straightforward. Eat fish fresh the same day it's cooked. If you have leftovers, eat them cold the next day on a salad or grain bowl. The omega-3s are still intact. The anti-inflammatory benefits are still there. Cold doesn't destroy omega-3s, heat does. So eat your leftover salmon cold, and you're actually protecting what made it valuable in the first place. If you're still here with me and finding this helpful, take a moment to type 2 in the comments. It lets me know you're watching and getting value from this. Food number 3, mushrooms. Here's one that almost no one talks about. Mushrooms are having a moment in the health world right now, and for good reason. They're packed with unique antioxidants, B vitamins, and beta-glucans that support immune function, particularly important for seniors. But cooked mushrooms left overnight and then reheated? That's a very different story. Mushrooms have an unusually complex protein structure. When you cook them, you begin breaking down those proteins. When you store them and allow them to cool, bacterial activity begins converting those broken down proteins into biogenic amines, compounds like putrescine and histamine. Now, histamine you may know as the chemical your body produces during an allergic reaction. But dietary histamine, histamine that enters your body through food, can trigger a different set of problems. It causes vasodilation, inflammatory responses in the gut lining, and in people who are already sensitive to it, which increases with age, it can cause symptoms that look remarkably like an allergic reaction without any obvious allergen. When you reheat those mushrooms, you're not destroying those biogenic amines. Heat doesn't neutralize them. You're just warming them up and eating them. For someone over 60 with a more permeable gut lining, elevated dietary histamine doesn't stay localized. It contributes to what researchers now call low-grade systemic histamine load, a state of mild but persistent immune activation that runs quietly in the background, contributing to the same chronic inflammatory environment I described earlier. There's also specific concern around purine content. Mushrooms, particularly after extended storage and reheating, release purines in higher concentrations. For anyone managing uric acid levels or at risk for gout, which becomes more common after 60, this is a meaningful consideration. The fix: mushrooms are best eaten the day they're cooked. If you do have leftovers, refrigerate them immediately after cooking, consume within 24 hours, and add them cold to salads or grain bowls rather than reheating. The pattern. I want to pause here for a moment because I think it's worth stepping back to see what all of these foods have in common before we get to the final two. What's the pattern? Each of these foods, eggs, fish, mushrooms, is genuinely healthy in its first form. The problem isn't the food. The problem is the transformation that happens through reheating. Heat applied to an already cooked food is chemically different from heat applied to a raw one. You're starting from a different baseline. The molecular structure is already altered. Fats are partially oxidized. Proteins are partially broken down. Bacteria have had hours to do their quiet work. And here's the part I want you to really sit with. None of this shows up immediately. You don't feel it after one reheated egg. You don't notice it after one plate of microwaved leftover fish. The compounds are small, the inflammation is low grade, but it is consistent. It accumulates. And for a body over 60, a body that processes toxins more slowly, repairs DNA less quickly, and has a thinner gut lining, consistent low-grade accumulation is precisely how serious illness begins. This isn't meant to alarm you, it's meant to arm you, because every single food on this list has a practical, easy alternative. You don't have to stop eating them, you just have to change how and when you eat them. Food number 4, processed and cured meats. Processed meats, ham, bacon, deli turkey, sausage, hot dogs, are convenient, protein-rich, and genuinely popular with seniors because they're easy to prepare. But they carry a specific chemical risk even before reheating. Processed meats are preserved with nitrites, sodium nitrite to be exact. These compounds serve as antimicrobials and give processed meats their characteristic pink color and extended shelf life. In moderate, isolated consumption, the body handles nitrites without major incident. Here's where reheating changes everything. When nitrite-containing meat is heated, and especially reheated, the nitrites react with the proteins and amino acids present in the meat to form a class of compounds called nitrosamines. This isn't a fringe concern. The World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same classification as tobacco, based largely on the nitrosamine connection. And nitrosamines form most aggressively at high temperatures. Every time you reheat your leftover ham in a hot pan or a microwave, you're generating a fresh burst of these compounds. Where do nitrosamines do their damage? Primarily in the stomach, colon, and esophagus, which is why processed meat consumption is so consistently linked to colorectal and stomach cancers in the research literature. But nitrosamines don't just threaten cellular health, they also drive vascular inflammation. They attack the endothelium, the inner lining of blood vessels, in much the same way as the oxidized fats we discussed earlier. The result is the same: damaged arterial walls, increased plaque formation, elevated cardiovascular risk. After 60, there's an additional factor. Your stomach acid becomes less potent. This means nitrosamines are less efficiently broken down in the digestive process and more likely to be absorbed into the bloodstream intact. The practical guidance here is a two-part approach. First, reduce processed meat overall. Fresh, unprocessed protein sources are preferable. Second, if you are eating processed meat, eat it cold, directly from the fridge. A cold slice of turkey on a whole grain cracker is very different from a slice of turkey blasted in a microwave. Cold minimizes further nitrosamine formation. Heat accelerates it. If this has been helpful so far, consider sharing this with a friend or loved one who regularly eats processed meats or reheats them without thinking. This is something many people simply aren't aware of, and a simple share helps more people find this information. Food number 5, starchy vegetables cooked in oil. I want to close with something that tends to shock people because it involves a food category that almost every senior health guide recommends: roasted vegetables. Carrots, sweet potatoes, parsnips, zucchini, beets, roasted in olive oil or vegetable oil, seasoned with herbs. It sounds like the textbook definition of healthy eating, and it is healthy the first time. Here's the problem. When you roast vegetables in oil at high temperatures, the oil undergoes partial oxidation. Some of the healthful properties of that oil, especially the polyphenols in olive oil, are degraded. Now you have leftover roasted vegetables sitting in oxidized oil. You put them in the fridge, pull them out the next day, and reheat them in the microwave or back in the oven. You've just applied heat to oil that's already in a compromised oxidative state. The aldehydes, reactive toxic compounds that form during oil reheating, are well documented. They don't just smell off. They are genuinely damaging to arterial tissue. But here's the part specific to starchy vegetables. Sweet potatoes, carrots, parsnips, these contain significant levels of natural sugars and starches. When they're cooked and cooled, something beneficial actually happens. Some of that starch converts to resistant starch, which acts like dietary fiber. It feeds healthy gut bacteria and slows glucose absorption. Blood sugar rises gently. Insulin response is modest. When you reheat those vegetables, the resistant starch converts back to regular digestible starch. Glucose floods into your bloodstream more rapidly. Insulin spikes. For someone over 60 with any degree of insulin resistance, and the majority of adults over 60 have some, these repeated glycemic spikes create oxidative stress in blood vessel walls. They accelerate arterial stiffening. They contribute directly to cardiovascular disease risk over time. So you have a double hit: aldehydes from oxidized oil attacking your arteries from one direction, and a sharp glycemic spike attacking them from another. The better approach: roast only what you'll eat that day, or roast without oil and add a drizzle of fresh oil afterward. Leftovers: eat them at room temperature or cold. Toss them into a grain bowl. The cold temperature preserves the resistant starch. The absence of additional heat prevents further oil oxidation. Simple, effective. The 5 swaps, a practical summary. Let me bring this all together because I want you to leave here with something you can actually use today. Eggs. Cook fresh every time, 3 minutes. Not worth the oxidized cholesterol risk of reheating. If you must reheat, use low heat on the stovetop. Never a microwave. Fish and seafood. Eat it the same day it's cooked, or eat leftovers cold the next day. Cold omega-3s are intact omega-3s. Reheated omega-3s become oxidized lipids. Let the fish be cold. Mushrooms. Cook and eat the same day. Leftover mushrooms go cold into a salad, not back into the microwave. Refrigerate immediately after cooking. Never leave them out. Processed meats. Minimize overall. When you do eat them cold. Never reheat in a pan or microwave. Cold minimizes nitrosamine formation. Heat maximizes it. Roasted vegetables. Cook only what you'll eat or eat leftovers cold in a bowl. Never reheat oil-coated vegetables. Add fresh olive oil after cooking, not before, to preserve its polyphenols. None of these changes require you to eat differently. They just require you to think differently about timing and temperature. And those changes, stacked together over weeks and months, meaningfully reduce your chronic inflammatory load. That reduction shows up in blood work. It shows up in energy levels. It shows up in blood pressure readings. Small daily habits compounded over time are the most powerful preventive medicine available. Final thoughts. I've been in preventive medicine long enough to know that the most important health decisions don't happen in a doctor's office. They happen in the kitchen at 7 p.m. when you're deciding whether to cook something fresh or just reheat what's in the fridge. At 8 a.m. when you're warming up last night's eggs. Those moments matter, especially after 60 when the body's margin for error has narrowed and the compounds from reheated food linger longer and do more damage than they would have a decade earlier. You're watching this because you care about your health. You're asking the right questions. And the adjustments we've talked about today don't require a prescription, a specialist, or a dramatic lifestyle overhaul. They require 5 small shifts in how you handle specific foods. Do that, and you're actively reducing the chronic inflammation that sits at the root of the 2 most serious health threats facing adults over 60. Which of these 5 foods surprised you the most? Tell me in the comments below. I read every one. And if you know someone over 60 who reheats these foods without knowing the risk, share this with them. Not to alarm them, but to give them what you now have, the information to make a genuinely safer choice. If this was useful, hit like. It helps this information reach more people who need it. And subscribe for more honest, evidence-based conversations about your health after 60. Take care of yourselves. The kitchen is one of the most powerful health tools you have. Now you know exactly how to use it. Everything shared here is general educational information and is not a substitute for personal medical advice. Please consult your own physician before making changes to your diet or health routine.